Over the years, animated movies have been really well received by the modern audience. People really like a cohesive story when told right with good characters and good world building. On the one hand, anime movies are amazing. Yeah, movies like Demon Slayer, Suzume, which are literally global phenomenons, that's considered anime movies. But when it comes to traditional animated movies or traditional animation movies, movies like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse, something like Transformers 1 and Puss in Boots, which I'm going to be talking about in this video, I feel like whenever there's a movie where there is an established protagonist and an established antagonist, the way these two characters play out or the dichotomy between these two characters is really important. Yeah, on the one hand, it's really important to have a strong protagonist, but I think it's even more important to make sure that the motivations and particularly the character nature of the antagonist is very well established. And spoiler alert for these two movies. If you haven't watched them, I highly recommend you go watch them. You can go ahead and watch those two movies and then come back to this video. Starting off with Transformers 1. Transformers 1 is easily one of my top 10 favorite animated movies ever due to how good the story is and more importantly how different it is from the traditional full budget premiere of an actual Transformers movie. Although Transformers 1 has a solid Hollywood cast when it comes to voice acting, I feel where it really stands out is it has its own unique design, but it looks so familiar. Like, I feel like if you place Puss in Boots and Transformers without the world building and just consider the overall palette of the animation, they both look really similar in one way. I feel like there is this soft reboot of animation style, which particularly started with the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. Coming back to Transformers 1, this video is purely going to be about the nature of the antagonist. If you actually think about it, and if you remind yourself about your favorite animated movie, whatever animated movie that you're thinking about, let's say Kung Fu Panda, the first movie of Kung Fu Panda was so great and so unique, and I would like to argue that the reason why this movie was that great and that unique was because of how Tai Lung as a character played out and how his influence sort of made Po wanting to train and becoming the Dragon Warrior. Now, Kung Fu Panda is a movie which is a decade old. I'm not going to say it's not relevant to this conversation. I believe the influence of having a great antagonists come from movies like this. I just wanted to mention Kung Fu Panda as like an honorary mention. So Transformers 1 starts out as like an origin story to Optimus and Megatron. Like, we've obviously seen Transformers movies before, but if you're someone who's like in a general audience, which including me by the way, I didn't know the origins of Transformers, but this movie is basically like the origin story of Megatron and Optimus Prime. Megatron, all the way throughout the movie, sort of morphs into character that he's meant to be. The dichotomy that Megatron has with Optimus Prime is Megatron carries this inward hatred towards the people that have betrayed him. On the one hand, you can see Megatron sort of have this inward hatred towards the people that he thinks have betrayed him. They have actually betrayed him. When you contrast this with someone like Orion Pax, who ultimately becomes Optimus Prime, he feels like if you have to rebuild an empire from scratch and have the Autobots sort of help rebuild this empire of utopia that they both eventually dreamed of from the starting of the movie, you cannot start a new empire with blood. So on the one hand, you have Megatron, whose main goal is to basically take revenge on people who did wrong by him. At least that goal becomes concrete to him at the middle of the movie when he learns the actual nature of why the cause of Autobots had been taken away. But Orion Pax sort of has this mind-boggling theory of approaching things with peace. On the one hand, you sort of sympathize with Megatron. I mean, at the corner of your mind, you also think that Megatron kind of makes sense with his analogy. For all of his life, he's been working in hard labor, trying to fill the pockets of the enemy state. So it's like all his efforts that he did throughout his entire life just was fruitless, and in fact harming the very empire which he thought he was protecting. Obviously, in the end, the protagonist is the one that wins, and Orion Pax finally becomes Optimus Prime because of his approach of non-violence. And he sort of takes a call to not execute Megatron because, again, he's sticking to his principles of, I want to start this utopia without bloodshed. But the dichotomy of how one problem is viewed by two individuals who have grown up in similar conditions together as close friends sort of ends up diverging because of how emotions play out between these two characters. Highly believe that the reason why this movie did so well is because of how well Megatron was written, how well his voice was, which if you observe discreetly, you'll realize that throughout the movie, Megatron's voice sort of becomes more agitated, more violent, more rageful, which is a great touch to a character. Moving on, let's talk about Puss in Boots. In Puss in Boots, the motivation of the protagonist and the antagonist is independent of each other, unlike what it was in Transformers 1. So, in this movie, the antagonist, who is a metaphorical figure for death, is a wolf character, which is like a yin yang towards what the cat is as a protagonist. So, you want to make the antagonist as a big, scary, dominant figure in that world of fiction. Thus, the antagonist was a big bad wolf, and that wolf is literally the figure of death itself. And throughout the movie, death basically follows the protagonist. It runs on this belief of cats have 9 lives, and the protagonist has lived 8 lives and has lost these 8 lives in a very meaningless way. And there is this overarching theme of what it means to live a meaningful life, very deep philosophical questions, things like that. All of this is wrapped in a clean package of like running away from death and accepting death. So you sort of travel this journey with the protagonist of him basically running away from responsibilities, running away from death, living a meaningless life, having no goals and aspirations. Well, where towards the end of the movie, he sets upon this journey where he sort of discovers himself and has this great epiphany of having to lead the rest of his life in a meaningful way, although he just has 1 life and has lost the 8 lives previously that he had. He still has it in himself to make sure that he lives this 1 life as meaningfully as he can. When it comes to the antagonist in Puss in Boots, I remember it was kind of an irky situation when the movie came out, saying that the antagonist was too brutal for him to be the antagonist of like a child's movie, which Puss in Boots is. But I feel like they wanted to tell a somewhat mature story through the movie, and they've rightfully done a really good job. So, my conclusion is, if you want to write a good story when it comes to characters with fixed roles like a protagonist and an antagonist, just having a great antagonist sort of anchors the protagonist's motivation, gives the story its overall plot, and gives it something to work towards. And having this adventure sort of set before the viewers is not only a great start, but it also starts with having a good antagonist.